The focus is, as Chris has already indicated, what do Democrats need to learn about the interests and concerns of our rural fellow citizens? That the Democratic Party, as everybody knows, tends to be tilted urban, and we represent everyone. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce the first of the panelists, Barb Fuller, who's been a longtime activist in Washtenaw County. I expect that many of you know her. Barb, would you please start? Just unmute yourself.
I believe I have. Can you hear me?
We can. Perfect.
Very good. Good morning, everyone. My name is Barbara Fuller. I live in Sharon Township, which is on the far western side of the county. I'm technically, mailing address is Manchester. So I'm over in the southwest corner of the county. It's my pleasure to be here today, and I appreciate being invited to make some brief remarks. The question is with respect to how to mobilize and turn out rural voters in greater numbers. And I appreciate the attention that's being pointed to the half of the county that is west of Zeeb or Baker or Wagner or whatever demarcation you choose. There are people, I'm sure, who have never even been that far. When I first introduced myself and explained where I lived, people thought I was almost to Chicago. Not true, not true. We're just a little further west. Many of you enjoy the open spaces and the non-motorized trails and the parks out in our section of the county. My recommendations with respect to campaigning in rural communities is coordination or contact and banking results thereof. Jennifer Fairfield, as chair of the Western Washtenaw Dems for many years, and Pam Burns before her, have worked very diligently to make sure that the western side of the county has a voice and a presence and an identity. What happens is in these districts, people go where the vote density is, right? Where it's easy to walk, where it's easy to knock doors, where you get the most for your efforts if you're out there on the streets. So when you campaign in rural communities, you're going to have driveways that are really long. You're going to have houses that you can't even see from the road. You're going to be on dirt roads, and you have to plan more time for the voter contact out in our half of the county. It would be helpful to have countywide voter analysis so we maximize our time when we're actually out going door to door. And the voter guide, something again that Jennifer has done and we've done as a county party for, dare I say, decades, is really helpful. People appreciate receiving what is perceived as objective and information about candidates and ballot proposals. And I think we've done a great job of doing that. It's a very time-intensive document to put together. And walking it to people's doors is pretty non-threatening because you're going there to give them some information and they appreciate that. Identifying local voices to amplify messages about local concerns is helpful. It's also important to be good listeners when you're out in the rural parts of the county. People typically are not invited to tell you what's on their mind out our way. So it's important to listen to local concerns and to have ways to identify those. There are local communication channels, a few newspapers, blogs, certainly, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of those are utilized. But I will say there is still spotty coverage with reliable, accessible broadband and internet coverage. So when we rely on what's fast and inexpensive, the net for your efforts is aligned with that. So it's fast and easy. You're not going to get the depth and the breadth that you're hoping for, but I understand why it's utilized. So just remember, if you're working the western half of Washtenaw County, it's going to take more time. You're going to have to actually drive between houses often, and you need to be respectful of signs where they're saying no trespassing, no soliciting. don't go there. You're going to piss people off. If they say don't come, then leave them alone. Typically, you're not going to find, at least in my experience, a lot of dogs or other kinds of threatening amenities when you go to the doors, but be respectful. You can leave things at the door, but if someone has said, don't come to my door, then don't go to their door. That's a net loss. Door-to-door is effective and important, but again, you've got to allow extra time. Don't cut across people's lawns. They don't like that. And be mindful of community events where people gather. So we know we're all spread out. There are community events, which candidates will be advised, don't do parades, don't do yard signs, don't go to ice cream socials. You don't meet enough people. You don't know who you're talking to. Well, maybe, but if you're going to ramp up your name ID, you need to at least have a presence at some of those things. We take our community fairs pretty seriously, look forward to those every year. Parades are something, again, where people notice. And I would encourage candidates and the party to have groups of people, right? So you have ambassadors, surrogates, whatever you want to call them, because candidates, they're only one person, so many hours in a day. So you have to find a way to extend that introduction and the name ID. There are 20 townships in Washtenaw County, and to go from the northeast corner to the southwest corner can be an hour's drive. So you need to, again, understand what you're getting into. It's very valuable work. It makes a difference, but it can be daunting to someone who's used to walking a subdivision where you can hit, 100 doors in short order. Not true out our way. There are a few pockets of developments where you can have higher density, but by and large, shift your mindset to be looking at spending more time, not only getting to a door, but if someone will engage with you, to actually listen, pay attention, make notes of that, get to those township meetings, have some identification on you at a township meeting. Politicking at township meetings is typically not welcomed. You can make remarks during public comment. But again, showing up is more than half the battle out in the rural areas. Should be contacting township supervisors, introducing yourselves. A criticism is often, I've never even seen someone from the Democratic Party in the township hall, or a candidate has never even touched base with me. Well, you got to find a way to do that. And again, we need to work together. We need to be clear that we're in solidarity with each other as Democrats, and listen to the issues. And I think Jennifer is going to speak a little more in depth on issues that resonate out in this half of the county. But you really need to listen, because often rural residents believe they are discounted, ignored, dismissed. If you come to my township and want to talk about public transit, you're not going to get anywhere, right? We don't take the bus out here. It's not an issue. Maybe in Chelsea City, maybe in Dexter City, maybe a little bit in Manchester Village, but by and large, you have to be mindful of what's important to the person you're talking to at the door. So get out the vote, of course, is very important. I know Western Washtenaw Dams and Jennifer have worked very hard to do their very best to identify people who are aligned with us and will vote with us, and then get out there and vote. We need to have people working the polls, putting out yard signs at the polls, but also sign up to be an election worker. We need our people in there as well to monitor what's going on and to ensure the integrity of what's going on. If there are problems or voter intimidation going on, which in my township there was in the presidential when Donald Trump was running, you have to know who to call and how to deal with that. Not engage it, but how to de-escalate it and take care of it in a very purposeful, dignified, respectful way. But there will be efforts to intimidate. And as Congresswoman Dingell said, Michigan is targeted. So we're going to see some activity If not in August, most definitely in November. And I want to be mindful of my time and be respectful of everyone. I don't have.
You have some more time, Barb.
Okay.
After you finish speaking, if you'd be willing to take a few questions, because I know you do have to leave before the
Sure.
panel's over, that would be lovely.
Okay, I've made some arrangements. I've actually traveled to my next meeting, so I'm sitting in someone else's house to be able to do this and stay with you because I want to hear what you have to say and what your questions are. There is a rural caucus within the Michigan Democratic Party, which you'll be introduced to by Marie here shortly. It's an interesting group to belong to. If you have the time and the bandwidth and the access, please jump in there and be supportive of that effort. And we always want to remember the agricultural sector in the western half of the county. Take a drive sometime. Come on out Scioto Church Road, up and down M52, and dive off on a side road. And you will be amazed at the vistas and the agriculture. It's beautiful out here, and that's why we live here. It's beautiful. We have privacy. It's quiet. We can see the stars at night. And we're very concerned about people being treated respectfully, regardless of their opinion or their point of view. But there is, as you know, the farmers have their organizations. There's the Michigan Farm Bureau. Get in touch with those. See when the annual meetings are. Reach out, make friends. You'll discover those kinds of connections at the township meetings because many of the township officials are connected to agriculture. There's also local issues in my township. There is a huge, over 400 acres, formerly agriculture, which was purchased by Stoneco, which is a gravel, an aggregate hauling company. So there will be issues like that you're not going to find in Pittsfield Township, I don't think, or the city of Ypsilanti. Nobody's coming in to mine gravel in those places. So again, be mindful of the local issues, check into those township websites, get a plan together for coverage of them so they see you repeatedly. You don't have to make a big speech at every meeting, but they notice if you come more than once and who are you? And after the second time, they'll say, you know, what the heck is this? What is this about? What are you doing about this? They'll engage you. But you have to do more than be a kind of a hit and run identity, which is why it's important to have a team that's covering these meetings, tracking the agendas, the local issues. So I think with that, I would be happy to entertain any questions, or if you want to proceed, Eli, with the other panelists and do questions at the end, it's your call, but well, I can stay.
I see a few hands up, so I'm going to ask if Teresa Reed had her hand up and the hand went down. If Teresa still has a question, she should feel free to ask. I think we can be a little more informal. So this is meetings, not webinar. So let's try it. We'll experiment. Teresa?
Okay. Yeah, sure. Thanks so much, Barb. These are great. This is great advice. Great direction. I'm listening to you and I'm thinking about sometimes it's people are a little afraid to canvass in town, right? Because people don't want to knock on strangers' doors. There's a resistance to canvassing it then. And I know that a lot of people, first of all, there's, as you mentioned, the distances, but you've also mentioned sometimes some hostility. And so what would your advice be to the precinct organizing committee and voice committees as we are doing, working with volunteers and recruiting volunteers to canvass and table in areas where Democrats are kind of rare? What would you tell people about how to engage to get them over their fears about it?
Well, first of all, just go do it, right? And you'll find that it's not the stereotype you've been led to believe. I had somebody say, well, I'm afraid I'm going to get shot if I go up somebody's drive. I'm like, simmer down. No, you're not. Knock on a door, be respectful, give them a little time to get to the door. When they come to the door, introduce yourself. Hi, I'm Barb Fuller. I'm a volunteer. I wanted to share this information with you, have a few questions if you have time to speak with me. If they say, look, I'm busy, go away. Say, thank you for your time. May I leave this information with you and move on, right? Don't go in there with your 10 questions and expect them to indulge you. Also, don't be discouraged if the reception that you get feels a bit like rejection. You got to be a big girl about this and just say, I'm a volunteer. Stress you're a volunteer. You should have identification on you so that they don't think you're somebody who's coming to see if anyone's home. And if they're not, to do something they shouldn't do. Again, as much as you can do to bridge a stranger to a stranger, smile, always smile. Again, we're just people out here, but we're not accustomed to folks knocking on our door unless it's the propane delivery or FedEx or Amazon, right? So just take a deep breath, knock on the door, expect it to be a friendly exchange and treat it as such. If somebody says, no, thank you, I appreciate your time. May I leave this information with you to look at another time? And remember to vote on August 2nd.
Eli, can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
And that is, so somebody recently circulated an article from, I can't remember where, but the pull quote was, the brand is so toxic that, Democrats will get chased out of rural areas because the brand has become so toxic. So I welcome some conversation about that from all of the panelists, but also just, Barb, when you say identify yourself, would you say I'm so-and-so from the Democratic Party, or does that shut things down immediately?
My name is Barb Fuller. I live in the area. If you do, don't lie. Never lie. Don't make stuff up. Don't lie. They'll catch you. And they'll remember that above all else, right? Hi, I'm Barb Fuller. I'm a volunteer. Wanted to leave some information with you, share some information about the upcoming election. If they have anything that you can see, what a beautiful garden you have. Oh, what a lovely spot you live in. Again, something to bridge that initial conversation while they're trying to figure out who you are and whether they want to spend 10 seconds with you. So, just go into it with an open mind, be friendly, smile. It goes a long ways. If you're going up there, I'm a volunteer and I want to talk to you, not going to work, but that doesn't work anywhere, right? Yeah. We're not aliens out here. We just live in a different kind of setting. Does that answer your question, Teresa?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, thank you so much. Really, I just love this panel.
So, Barb, if I might, I'd like to give Caroline Sanders the chance to ask me a question, then we'll move on to Kyron Smith.
Certainly. Commissioner Sanders, one of my favorite people. Hi.
I have a question.
Please, mic is yours. Oh, is that Loretta?
That's me. That's Loretta.
Okay, actually, Caroline Sanders has her hand up. Let me.
I couldn't find the hand up button. I couldn't find the hand up button.
It's under reactions.
Okay, okay.
So Caroline, then Loretta.
Okay. So good morning, Commissioner Fuller. Brenda McKinney and I are here together. And I've got a question about, so Voice has been conducting these town halls in each district, and we started with the most rural districts because we wanted to hear from the constituents out there how the Democratic Party, Washtenaw Party anyway, can do a better job of trying to be more inclusive, sort of wipe away this it's not a perception, this feeling that Ann Arbor kind of runs all things. My question is really targeted. I'm going to just talk about the elephant in the room. If we are trying to engage people that don't look like your population, people of color, to come and be more engaged out in the rural areas on behalf of the Democratic Party, what would you say to us? We're clearly out of place. I would clearly be out of place. So how would you advise that your suggestions for how to interact? That's pretty generic, but I just need you to add that layer of me being a person of color, being able to address and get involved or show up at events that are occurring as a way of showing support to the Dems that are in that area, whether or not it's a farmer's market or a parade. Is there anything that you would add on to your recommendations about how we might be received, if we should be concerned about safety? Because what we did learn was there are some Dems rurally that are so alone in their numbers that it's not even necessarily safe for them to have like yard signs up because of hostility they may face. So I'm not trying to make this a racial question, but I am trying to make it a, what do you do when you're like clearly outnumbered, period? How would you be received?
Senator Sanders, it's wonderful to see you, and hello there, Treasurer McKinney. I appreciate your candor and the question. And I do know that in the city of Chelsea, in the last cycle, there was a person of color going door to door on behalf, I believe, of the party, maybe not a specific candidate. And law enforcement was called because there was suspicion about this individual, again, who didn't look like the people in that neighborhood going door to door. So as much as I wish that it didn't exist, there is a skepticism and sometimes a suspicion. And I would say that I've experienced it in the reverse. So I think what I would recommend is to go in partnership with someone else who lives there as a bridge to it. If you're in forums, I think it's important to point out that people in urbanized, economically disadvantaged, sometimes communities, we've got a lot in common. The East Side and the West Side have a lot in common in terms of being heard, in terms of access to services. And I think it's another instance of go in with an expectation that it's going to be a cordial conversation, maybe not friendly at first, but cordial. If there are people who feel isolated and alone out in the rural areas because of whatever circumstances they're experiencing, if we can help them get together somehow. I know forums that are put on in the evenings out in my area, people really pick and choose on whether they're going to go to those or not. Is that a valuable use of their time? So while it's appreciated, the overture is appreciated, I think maybe lower your expectations on participation in physical presence. Again, we're working on getting broadband expanded to everybody in the county so that that's a platform and a channel that we can use to join together in a non-threatening way, or you don't have to get out on a winter night or when it's pouring rain, or you feel uncomfortable doing those things. So partner up with someone from the neighborhood. If there's a way to attend public meetings, again, during public comment, introduce yourself, say a few words, and make yourself available. So I'd go door to door with you, Caroline, if you'll go door to door with me.
Thank you. I know Loretta Codrington.
I sure would. And I appreciate that response, Barbara.
Loretta.
Well, Carolyn practically answered the question for me. I was just basically going to say that, and I put it in the chat, about my husband who literally will not go canvassing with me, even in our subdivision, because of him being a Black male. And so one of the things, and first off, Barb, thank you for your comments on the rural community and how we can get out there and get our message heard, because that's the goal. Our goal is to actually get the message heard to folks who are not hearing our message, but we don't want to be in danger. We don't want to, we don't want to put our folks in situations where, they're going to be harmed. And so we have to be strategic about that. And so I heard you say, go with other people. That's one of the common things that we try to do, is to partner folks up. And there's very few of us, and Teresa can speak more to this, but my experience has been, there's very few of us, meaning African-Americans, who are canvassing already. So we don't want to lose the few that we have to, friendly, I'm not saying friendly fire, but to any kind of danger. So what I would ask is, specifically, besides us doing things in terms of partnering up, in terms of, being nice, which we are. I mean, we're not sending folks out who don't know how to behave. Okay, right. Our canvassers are the most wonderful people, polite, absolutely, know how to behave, and they're putting their lives, even in just like the subdivision, they're putting their lives in danger. When I go out, I went out canvassing to apartment buildings, and it was pretty scary, but I know what I needed to do. So in terms of that, what can you guys do in terms of receiving folks like us? Because we kind of know what it is we need to do and what our goal is. We want to come out and be able to service these areas. So how would you say that you guys would prepare yourselves to receive us? It would be my question.
Again, I would recommend partnering with somebody, right? So that one, there's that, you always feel more confident, safer, if you will, if you've got somebody else with you. So I would encourage the partnering. I'm not naive enough to think that a person of color going up and down my dirt road is going to be suspect. That person would be. So to the extent that you can partner with a person in the community, I think that's the best advice I have. Also, to have stakeholders and opinion leaders in the community speak on behalf of their commitment to being inclusive and diverse, that we're all in this together. We all benefit when we have achievements in elections. Again, where's the common ground? Where does it benefit that person at the door to have spent time with you, to engage with you, and to vote for the Democrat? Because as you know, there's a lot of misinformation, a lot of lies out there. So if someone remembers this nice person or this couple came to my door, they introduced themselves, they offered information to me, they weren't obnoxious, they didn't demand that I open my door and let them in. Another thing, don't ever go in anyone's house when you're doing doors. Try to be as human and open as possible. And if they put their hand up, thank them for their time, leave information if they'll take it, and leave. They'll remember that. that you didn't harass them. And somebody comes to my door, I open a window way at the top. Who are you? I get some sketchy people that come. If it's not magazines or knives or someone who wants to convert me, I'm inclined to keep them at a distance. So don't take it personally, but we're kind of protective out where we are because we're alone, right? We sometimes feel threatened when a stranger comes to our door. I know if I'm home alone and I don't have a big dog anymore, somebody comes to my door, I'm careful.
Right, thank you. I do want to get to Kyron Smith. He's next in the list here, but I see that Marie Joppich has a hand up. So please, Marie, go ahead.
Greta Liv, what she said, canvassing in her subdivision even was uncomfortable for her husband. Where does she live?
Yeah.
On the west side of Ann Arbor, on the west side of Ann Arbor.
Are you asking me, Barb?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I live on the northwest side, Thaler and Burwood.
Okay.
Yeah, Ward 5 is where
Okay.
I'm at.
Okay.
Right. I just wanted to talk for a few seconds because this is a great conversation and I live in Livingston County. So Livingston County, we've been in the news a few times. Sometimes. But I want to say this is where Barbara's right, is meeting with the local people. Because like for Livingston County, there's a lot of areas which is very open for diversity. Like if you come in the town area, I live in Hamburg, it's even becoming blue. Howell, which has a very bad reputation, is really electing a lot of Democrats. And when we had a protest to actually speak out for LGBTQ team, and we actually in Pinckney, we had a Black Lives Matter movement that was highly attended. There's a lot of areas in our rural area that we are becoming way more, where we just care about one another. Now, again, I live like out here and probably like 2-3 miles down the road. I'm pointing down the road out my window.
Marie, you just
the local area, we can definitely help say where to be. And I think, it could really start helping people grow. Just like Shannon said, there's a lot where we can do together. So it's not necessarily dangerous for everyone, but like Loretta said, you have to be smart where you go, and working with the local people in that county, we can definitely find great places to work together that helps all of us out.
Okay, thank you so much. Kyron Smith is next on the panel. I'm kind of moving. Barb was first because I thought she had to leave early from the big picture, so to speak. So Kyron has worked on the rural areas in the entire state of Michigan for a University of Michigan think tank. And then we're going to move then focus our attention more and more towards Washtenaw County. It's kind of by itself. So Kyron, go ahead.
Yeah, I know I wasn't able to do it earlier, but can I see if I can share my screen? And if not, that's all right. And I can go.
Let me make you a co-host, and then you should be able to share your screen.
Okay.
All right. I think you shouldn't have a problem.
All right, awesome. Thank you. All right. All right, so is everybody able to see everything all right?
Yep, this is perfect.
All right. So thank you for having me. I do think it's an important conversation on, what urban Democrats in Washtenaw County can learn or need to learn from our rural fellow citizens. And so starting off, this is a research project I actually did in 2020. And it was a part of a series of papers or projects that we did to really see how we compare the urban side of Michigan and the rural side of Michigan. My project in particularly was on civic discourse. And so how do people talk to one another? How do elected officials perceive that, residents talk to each other, and how that varies depending on where you live. So if I can get my screen to change. Okay. All right. So what we'll cover is the actual research that I did in 2020, what some prior research says about this topic, and then some takeaways that I think, should influence our actions or should at least invoke some thought. So let's see. Okay. So to start off, I work for the University of Michigan Center for Local and Urban Policy, which is CLOSE-UP for short. And so every year, and some of you may know this, they send out a survey to every jurisdiction in the state. It's a long list of dozens of questions ranging from, economics, social issues, demographic issues, and it's the elected officials who are answering the questions and giving their feedback to this survey. And so when this research was done in 2020, we used questions from 2018 because it usually takes about a year and a half to process all this data. And so these are the opinions of the elected officials is an important thing to keep in mind. So this may be factual as, what the reality is, or it could just be, how elected officials from their seats are seeing things in their own jurisdictions. And then lastly, the cities and jurisdictions that we have in the survey, they're separated between being completely rural and completely urban. You'll kind of see how that comes out in the data. So, quick question for the host. So I'm getting the admitting people from the waiting room. Are other people getting that as well, or should I just ignore that?
You can ignore it. Just continue.
Okay, awesome. So the first question that we looked at on this survey was, how is civic discourse between elected officials and residents? And so this is specifically looking at how these officials are perceiving it. And so as we looked at a lot of mostly urban and urban places. And I think one thing that's important is what you see here is everybody, despite where they're from, has an agreement on how they think their civic discourse is going. And so typically the more urban you get, the more the elected officials say, our discourse is great. We're doing a great job talking to our residents, and that's constructive. But at the same time, rural residents think the same thing. So this is just one of the questions where we might have been a little surprised, not expecting that, rural and urban people, as far as when it comes to elected officials, think very similarly on how their discourse is. And this was in 2020, so the year of the presidential election, where a lot of people assume, discourse wouldn't be at its top shape. Yet in both, rural and urban places, elected officials found it was somewhat constructive. The next question we looked at were among residents. So the first question was how elected officials feel when they're involved. And then the second question was, how do elected officials feel that residents talk among each other and how productive that is? And so here you have still the plurality of responses are the same, not quite as optimistic as before. So right here, people are assuming that the discourse is mixed. So some of it is constructive, some of it isn't. And then again, as you move towards more urban places, I guess elected officials have more confidence in their residents that the discourse is better. Again, whether that's factual or the reality or not, we don't know, but we know that that's how they're thinking, and that the elected officials on both sides are thinking very similarly. And so the third and fourth question were a combination of those. And so this looked at tone of discussion compared to 5 years ago. So pretty much between 2020 and the previous election around 2015, 2016. And so what we found here, again, that was common is that, most people in urban or rural jurisdictions feel like discourse is improving, it's going well. And so when we look at tone of discussion with elected officials and residents, 34% of them felt like things were getting more civil. Among some of the residents, where we have resident tone, not quite as optimistic on either the urban or rural level, and 23% felt like things have gotten more civil over the past 5 years. And these are among kind of other options of, less civil, neutral, and things like that. But for the majority of them, we saw positive results. And so a little bit on existing research and why this is important, especially to some of the things I've heard with, Barbara say with canvassing. And so what we see in existing research is that divisiveness is existing in part because the term urban has an association with being, prosperous, having prosperity. I know I heard with Washtenaw, a lot of people feel like things revolve around Ann Arbor. And that's sort of the takeaway that the research here was talking about is, people assume because it's Ann Arbor, because it's urban, that, they should have decision-making power, or they're economically correct. Versus a lot of times with rural jurisdictions, you see it associated with economic struggle or people who aren't as educated or don't know what they're talking about. And so that's one of the reasons in existing research we see kind of that challenge in discourse. The other one is when we look at urban and rural areas, unfortunately, they have become so polarized where I've also heard, as Democrats in rural areas, you're few and far between. And so that makes it a lot harder to have these productive conversations that we would like to have. And then, so really what we see with the issues with this discourse is that it's challenged by, the challenge is misconception, right? So, being rural doesn't necessarily mean you're economically challenged, or being urban doesn't necessarily mean you're economically prosperous. And same thing with the political parties, because you're rural, you could be a Democrat or you could be a liberal. And if you're urban, it could be vice versa. So on top of this research, I wanted to talk about a few takeaways that would potentially be beneficial. And so that's really talking on the misconceptions. And so the first one is what we can see in the research is that with elected officials, each time they had a survey, they always viewed when they were involved that the discourse was better, right? Which could be true, could not be true. And I think that's a misconception that, elected officials aren't believing that residents or volunteers have the means to have constructive conversations, right? And so when we think about urban rural, we see a lot of the similar things. So a lot of times urban people don't give rural people the credit enough to think that they can have constructive conversations amongst themselves. So just the misperception with elected officials that, they aren't the end all be all. Residents have a lot of power and a lot of, decision-making power and production that they can do. Rural people, same thing. And how Democratic and Republican people view their relationships with urban and rural residents, same thing. There is a lot of tension because of how polarized things are, but Democrats can offer things to Republicans and vice versa. And this misconception, because it exists, when we talk about over 5 years, how discourse has improved or how it's mixed among residents, it's because, these misconceptions cause a lot of tension and it hurts our ability to do things like canvass door to door or to pass policy that helps everyone or to hold certain festivals and things of that nature. So let's see, I believe I have more slide if it changes. Okay. So last, finding a balance in a solution. So some of the things that I looked at through my research and that I've heard just through talking to people in Washtenaw County is as elected officials or community members, there should be a prioritization and understanding that residents are very capable and deserving to be in situations where they can have constructive conversations and decision-making conversations. So if that's going door to door, if we're a resident and we have somebody who from the Democratic Party or somebody else, there should be a space and a respectability there to allow them to talk. Not saying you have to listen to them for 10, 15, 20 minutes, but, respect them enough to understand that they have something valid to say. If you're from an urban neighborhood and you're listening to the opinions of someone from a rural place, they very much have that standing and that knowledge where they should be listened to. And the same, that's true with urban and rural folks. That's true with urban Democrats and rural Democrats. It's true with people as a whole from rural neighborhoods and urban neighborhoods. And I feel like doing this will avoid some of the political polarization that we see between urban and rural communities because, we'll get used to seeing each other. We'll understand that, all these misconceptions we have. I know Barbara talked about, some people are afraid that they'll, might get hurt or shot at the door. Once you talk to some of these people, you will still have your differences, but some of that polarization will go down. And especially on a local level, And this is my last point, that, you know, this isn't always state government or federal government where there is no overlap, there are no shared experiences. A lot of times, especially in rural neighborhoods, you know, you experience the same things. You both have similar goals and things like that. So take those things, and, you know, politics will play part of it, but really what y'all have in common can help, you know, settle some of the divisiveness, and, you know, provide better solutions for everybody. So that is it. Thank you. And I'm open to any questions.
Thank you. I'm certainly prepared to consider questions if people want to ask them now, but I also do want to give the other panelists a chance to speak. So Marie, is it Joppich or Joppich? You're next.
Oh, thank you, Joppich. So,
Joppich, thank you.
hello, everybody. I am I'm part of the Michigan Rural Caucus. And we started, I think, like maybe 3 or 4 years ago with 12 people. I hold up 5 fingers, but it's really 12 people. And we're up to probably in our monthly meetings, maybe 80 to 90 people. So it's exciting to see the caucus grow. And one of the reasons we started was, just as Kyron was talking about, one of the issues in the rural area is that they feel that the Democrats have left them behind. And we have, and part of the challenge is, just like, you know, Barbara was talking about, door knocking is hard. Like, I've door knocked in the city, in Lansing, and also in the rural area. So in the city, I can cover like 20 homes in like under an hour. In the country, I'm lucky to get to 3-4 homes in an hour. So if you're looking at cost effectiveness and how to get out, the rural area is really difficult. But what we as the Rural Caucus want to do is to start helping build up the Democratic Party, because you can really see the issues are the same. Like, we have the same issues with healthcare. We have very few hospitals. It's hard to find a doctor in the rural area. The same thing with childcare. We need affordable childcare. So really, the issues between the urban and the rural are the same. So we actually have more in common than not in common. It's just some of it is a challenge of solving some of the issues is a little harder because of just the geographic area. So the Rural Caucus, what we started doing is, one, I'll put in the chat after I get done talking, our website. And one of the things we're doing is we have a little button, candidate introduction. So any candidates that are running can fill out a form. And we have a group that plans where we want to help support candidates, because we're going to support from the state Senate all the way down to the school board. So we want to, you know, do you need help with postcards? Do you know, people running for the first time for state rep, you know, how we can help them get the word out. So, and also like our messaging, we're going to have a messaging for all the different layers, so that the same thing, it doesn't matter to us if you're where you live, because it's, again, our issues are the same. So we want to be able to help bring together messaging for everyone. We also, like Barbara was talking about, you know, as people like say the state rep, like Washtenaw, you have the urban and the rural. From the Rural Caucus, we can also help with them as a vice chairperson, how to pull that group together, provide some resources for you. We have 2 fundraising groups. We have a 501c3 PAC, which is your normal PAC that can help. And what we are trying to do is give money to the candidates. We also have now, it's new, a 501c4, and it's called Michigan Rural Advocacy. Raised up $100,000. And for this PAC, it's not a PAC because it's a 501c3-4, but our goal is for fighting disinformation. So what we're going to do is go into communities to help people understand why childcare should be affordable, to help, you know, help build a community, help get out the word. So that one, we're working to join with the local areas on how can we do maybe food sustainability, help with food deserts, because a lot of it people just don't understand. So with the 501c4, we can help with that. One of the things, I'll share my desktop super quick. As I was working earlier, one of the things is this is example of billboards. We're going to be doing billboards across the state. So we just did 6 billboards, 2 in the UP, and we're looking actually in areas that are not highly populated so that they can start seeing. But one of our billboards going out is child tax credits. Who's fighting for it? The Democrats. So that's where we're looking for common issues so that we can roll out and people can see the billboard. Our website, this is where candidate support. So this is where if you're a candidate running in Michigan, you can click on this. It takes you to a Google form. And we just want to know what you're running for and what help do you need. And so those are the 2 things I wanted to show everybody. And I'll put this link in the chat. So from the Rural Caucus, we just really want to be able to get the word out, help everybody, because really us working together, that's going to be able to flip the state. So on to the next person, unless anybody has any questions.
Well, thank you so much. There will be a chance for questions after the panel finishes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer Fairfield.
Hi, good morning. I am Jennifer Fairfield. I am the chair of the Western Washtenaw Democrats. I think Barb mentioned that a few times. I wanted to talk a little bit about the issues out in Western Washtenaw, in the more rural parts of Washtenaw County. Marie said something that actually she and I were talking about the other day. The issues in the rural parts of the county are very, very much the same issues as in the urban parts of the county. There is maybe a little bit of a difference in terms of how they impact us and how we solve them, but we've got some of the same concerns that you've got. So clean water is a big issue for a lot of people. But when most people think of clean water in urban areas, they're thinking about lead in pipes. They're thinking about, Flint or gosh, brain just went blank on the west side of the state. But when we talk about clean water in the rural parts of the county, all of us, for the most part, are on well water. Unless you're in one of the cities or in one of the villages, you're on well water. And so your concerns for your well are a little bit different. You're worried about things like runoff from the farms. You're worried about things like, the gravel pits out here that Barb mentioned. There was a huge fight just a couple of years ago in Chelsea because of a gravel pit that was going to go in, and they thought they were going to come into this hick area and bring their gravel pit and not get any pushback on it. And boy, were they in for a surprise, because the residents in the Chelsea area really, really fought that gravel pit tooth and nail, and we won. But the problem, some of the issues that we brought up were the sediment and chemicals that were embedded in the area that would be brought up when the gravel pit was brought in and could potentially contaminate wells in the area. We talked about how it was right on a wetland that would impact the wildlife in the area. And I'll never forget one of the quotes that one of the people made. The gravel pit people said, well, the creatures will move. They'll go somewhere else. And one of the people said, you guys are going to do so much damage so quickly, they'll be dead before they can pack up their bags and go. And so those are, when we're talking about water, those are the sorts of things that we worry about. Not so much lead in the pipes, because we don't have service pipes, most of us coming to our houses. So when we talk about the issues, I'm looking at, for instance, the State Senate Bill 565 that was just passed on Wednesday, I believe, by or signed by the governor, that has a whole lot of money for taking the federal funds that we were allocated for, I think through the CARES Act, to improve drinking water, sewers, that kind of thing. The biggest chunk of that money is going to improve quality drinking water infrastructure. Not much of that is going to the rural areas. It's going to the cities. So when you're talking about those issues, you need to be aware that some of us out here are going to go, yeah, that doesn't do me any good. So approach those issues not necessarily from your mindset as an urban dweller, but more from the mindset of why, how things will impact you. Not that we don't care. I certainly care about the people in Flint and everything they went through. No question about that. We can talk about things like water and how clean water is important to each of us, and how some of the things that are being done in the urban areas, like replacing lead lines, are extremely important for the people in the urban areas. But we also want to talk about what we can do to ensure clean water in the rural areas. So that's just one area. Roads. I know somebody brought up, I think Barb was talking about the dirt roads out here that you have to travel if you're doing canvassing. Let me tell you, I put out a question to some of our Western Washtenaw Dems members and said, hey, I'm going to be talking with the Washtenaw Dems about the rural-urban divide. What issues concern you? And boy, did I get an earful about the roads. Barb could certainly speak more to the road conditions here in Western Washtenaw, because she is the chair of our road commission in Washtenaw County. But the main concern that we hear out here, lots of money goes to roads in this state when there's money allocated. That same bill that the governor signed on Wednesday, my understanding is there will be about 300 million slated to go for road and bridge projects. Guess how much is going to rural areas? Very, very little of that. And that is often the case. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't be targeting most of our money where we get the biggest bang for our buck. And that's where, that's the highways that are seriously traveled by lots of people. And you need to make those decisions when you're in government in terms of where money will get the most done. But many of us out in the rural areas feel like we get left behind because the urban areas will take the larger chunk of whatever money is available. So understand, roads are a big issue for everybody. They're a different issue in rural parts of the county. For those of you who don't know it, the vast majority of the roads in the rural parts of the county are dirt. And they're dirt because there isn't enough tax tax base out here to fund things, paving roads, and they're not traveled as much. So again, you got to decide where the money's going to go. But maintaining those dirt roads come spring. One of the people who sent me a note about the roads said, my road is so horrible that people it's so wet, so bad and muddy when spring comes along. People are driving off onto the sides of the road. And so now we're doing damage to the shoulders, to the natural elements that are growing alongside the roads. Because they can't go down the middle of the street. They can't go in the normal lanes of the road without doing serious damage to their cars or risking serious damage to their cars. One of the people I work with tells me she drives really slowly over her street. So roads are an issue for everybody, just a slightly different issue. Transportation. Barb said, you bring up public transportation out here, people are going to look at you cross-eyed. I would love to have public transportation that came out to the rural areas. One of the biggest concerns that I hear from people is there aren't a lot of jobs in the rural areas of Washtenaw County. Most of the jobs are further east or possibly further west. And getting to those jobs can be difficult. You've got to own a car. There is no way to get anywhere without a car. And it's not just jobs. I live outside of Manchester. We don't have a pharmacy in Manchester anymore. We have to drive to Chelsea, to Saline, to Clinton to get prescriptions filled because we did not have the level of people out here, the number of people out here to support a full-time pharmacy anymore. So anything that we need in terms of services is harder to get to. If there were any chance of having public transportation, that might be a way to get people moving around a little bit. But again, public transportation means putting a lot of money into it. And if you've only got a handful of people who are going to be using it, is it really worth the funding? So again, that's a similar issue. It is public transportation is a concern for a lot of people, both in rural and in urban areas. It's just a different concern. It's got a different flavor to it. And we all know about high-speed internet, that has been a major concern. I see Shannon nodding her head. Thank you, Shannon and Sue and the other commissioners for all the work that you guys and God, Barb, for the years and years and years of work that you've been doing on broadband. And it's finally coming to fruition out here. The vast number of people out here do not have access to broadband. I am extremely fortunate that I have broadband, and it's only because my neighbor has broadband, brought a T1 to his home, and my husband and he trenched a fiber optic cable between our houses, and I've got sort of fast speed internet. I have to be careful. I can't do too much at once on my computer, or myself and my mother. We can't both be on a video call at the same time, but at least I'm not doing dial-up or using up my minutes on my cell phone. There is $250 million in the bill that was signed by the governor on Wednesday for improving high-speed broadband access. Washtenaw County is estimating that it's going to cost $14.6 million, or that's what Washtenaw County has allocated for broadband, to bring broadband to about 3,300 people who are not served, right, Shannon? So if you think about the 14.6 million to bring broadband to about 3,300 people in Washtenaw County, the $250 million that the state is going to allocate maybe is going to cover, maybe at best, 55,000 households, probably not even that many, because when you think about how much more rural many parts of this state are than rural Washtenaw County, the amount of space in between every house that they're going to have to cover, it's probably going to cost more. So that 250 million isn't anything to sneeze at, but it's still not going to necessarily cover the or bridge that gap that exists for rural lack of broadband. I'm thrilled that we've got some focus on that. I think the pandemic brought a lot of focus on that, but it is still going to be an issue. And even here in Washtenaw County, it's going to be a couple years before everybody's actually connected. It's not going to happen overnight. So again, access to the digital age, I think, is a major issue out here in Western Washtenaw. And as Barb said, something we need to be aware of when we're making plans for how we reach out to our rural residents. You can't count on everybody being able to get to Facebook pages and to websites and that kind of thing, or even necessarily to be able to join these sorts of meetings. While I think that Zoom meetings have been a fabulous thing for us being able to reach out to more people because it's less of a commitment in terms of driving somewhere. Again, we've got to drive everywhere. In terms of spending the entire, how many hours it might take to be at one of these sorts of meetings. The Zoom has been a fabulous addition to our ability to reach out to people, but we're still missing a lot of people because they don't have the ability. I know, Barb, you end up using your minutes on your cell phone in order to join us for these sorts of things, and that's not cheap. One other thing I wanted to mention, and this is an area of not just concern, but I think there's a great deal of resentment still existing in the rural parts of Washtenaw County, and that is police coverage. And what I mean by that, some of you may not remember or may not be aware of what happened in Washtenaw County. I want to say it was around 2000 or maybe just a little after that, when the then county commission decided that after a great deal of pressure from some of the cities in the county, that one of the ways to save some money was to not offer sheriff services to the rural areas unless the rural areas contracted with the sheriffs to have those services. And the argument that was made was that the urban areas, the cities, have their own police forces. So why should their tax dollars go towards the sheriffs for the sheriffs to do road patrols in the rural areas? And frankly, because as often is felt out here, Ann Arbor sucks a lot of the air out of the county. The rural areas lost. So we don't have sheriff services for the large majority of the roads in Washtenaw County. We have to count on maybe the state police getting to us if there's a problem, and that's a big maybe. Many of the people in rural Washtenaw County don't live near a state police service area, so it takes quite a while for them to get to you. You might have a chance of the sheriff's office getting to you if they're not otherwise occupied in something else and they're closer. But we don't have a lot in the way of police services in the rural areas. And yes, we can contract with the sheriff's office for those services, but many of us don't live in townships that have the tax base to be able to afford that. Regardless of putting we can put a millage on the ballot. Even if we could talk people into it, the millage cost would just be way beyond. Where I live in Bridgewater Township, we have maybe around 1,000 voters, and I think something like fewer than 3,000 households. There's no way we could afford the money it would take to do sheriff services, to contract with the sheriff services out here. So when you're talking about the issues out here, Barb said, when you're knocking on doors doing canvassing, maybe say something about their home, or get to, make a comment about that would maybe give you some connection. I really suggest asking people what they care about, because you're going to be able to find something in common in terms of the issues. You're going to be able to then maybe talk about, hey, I get that you've got these concerns and we've got some of the same concerns, we just come at them from a different area, but you can find some common ground. That's not very difficult to do out here. One of the things that somebody talked about, I think it may have been Barb, was, maybe it was Teresa, was talking about tabling. In Ann Arbor, tabling is very common. You do tabling, and for those of you who don't know, you set up a booth or a table at the farmer's market or at the art fair or whatever to have people stop by and find out what you are doing in the Democratic Party. That's a little harder out here. Things are not quite as structured for that sort of thing at many of the events that we do in the rural parts of the county. My suggestion is come out and mingle during those events. Come out in somewhat force. don't try to overwhelm everybody, but come out wearing Washtenaw County Dems t-shirts or Dems Care t-shirts or something, with flyers, with information, and mix and mingle and talk to people. Tabling, people are a little more reticent about approaching you sometimes out here than they might be in Ann Arbor. So you've got to make a little bit more effort to talk to people. And even when you're going door to door, what you might find is while people are a little resistant at first, that again, if you can break that ice, I'm going to warn you, be prepared to spend more time actually talking to people out here than you might in Ann Arbor or Ypsi or in the more urban areas. People like to talk out here. We don't get a chance to talk to too many people because, we don't have very many neighbors. It's not as easy to stand and talk over your fence to your neighbor here. My neighbor, I can barely see them about an acre away from me. So, and I think, Barb, you have an even harder time seeing your neighbors. So understand that, yes, we've got some differences, but we've also got a lot in common. And then one more thing I wanted to make sure I pointed out, in Washtenaw County forever, we have had our representation both at the state and federal level split between urban mostly and rural mostly. There've been a little bit of areas where that's crossed, but for the most part, if you look at the, for instance, our current state house setup, we have one district that covers all of Western Washtenaw. And then we've got a bunch of other districts that cover parts of Ann Arbor and the more urban areas. Starting with this coming election in 2022, that changes big time. Both of our state Senate seats now encompass both rural and urban areas. Areas that were not necessarily of concern to the current state's House or state Senate setups are now becoming of concern. So our state senators are going to be representing both rural and urban areas. And that's going to be a big change to how things have been done. And they're going to have to be taking into consideration the concerns of both sides of the divide, I guess, if you want to call it that. Same thing goes for our House districts. We have had our House districts, like I said, the 52nd district where I currently live has all been the western side of Washtenaw, and the other House districts have all been the eastern side. Now, instead of running north-south, they run east-west, and they go all the way from Jackson into Ann Arbor. They go all the way along the top part of the county, some along the bottom. So there is a serious mix in our representation now, and we need to be taking that into consideration in terms of how we're working with our candidates, how our candidates are working with us, how we're talking about the issues and what those issues are that affect us, and how we talk with the residents of both areas and bring our concerns together instead of talking about kind of the us versus them that has happened a lot in Washtenaw County. Because, frankly, people in the more rural areas have had this love-hate relationship with Ann Arbor for a long time because they feel like Ann Arbor really does suck all that air, and you're not going to be able to for much longer. So you're going to need us. So I think I was the last of the panelists. So Eli, I think we can open up to questions.
Well, don't they put the most powerful batter at fourth position? No insult to the rest of the members of this team. Cleanup, right? That was sort of the effect. Thank you so much for taking a poll of your members to prepare for this meeting. That was extremely informative, and I took lots of notes. I happened to observe that we have in attendance a number of elected officials from rural areas. I don't want to kind of call anyone out, but if any member of that group would like to add a couple words, feel free to kind of raise your hand and join in. So, Shannon Beeman, go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to echo what everyone has said, excuse me, on the panel, and add that, we aren't that scary. There are Democrats out here, and when you find another Democrat, you are so excited. They are so excited that you are at their door, that you have cared enough to come and talk to them and introduce them to candidates. They are just, over the moon. So yes, there is a divide in our area. Luckily, also in our area, they like to put out signs and flags, and which houses not to necessarily approach. But we're just a loving community. There's a lot of families that have been here for generations, farming, raising families, feeding us, and I'm proud to be here and to be representing people like this. My husband's family is a family farm, and they've been here for hundreds of years. And it's just, it is fantastic. I'm not going to, put on only rose-colored glasses. We've talked about some of the bad pieces of this too. But there are great Democrats out here. We just don't tend to be as loud as our opponents. And we need to be, and that's where I think we can all help.
Thank you so much. Sushank.
Hi, thank you. I'm not going to turn on my video, but I appreciate this conversation greatly. I think that I am the first chair of the Washtenaw County Commission from a rural area in many, many years. It has changed the conversation. It's changed it in a lot of ways. It's changed it for what we do for rural communities. It's also changed it for what we do for and with the Ypsilanti community, the non-Ann Arbor communities, and Ann Arbor is still in the mix and still being served by the county commission. So I think it is important to also remind everybody that sometimes the Ann Arbor races get the most attention, but whoever runs with a significant part of Ann Arbor is likely to win once you get past the primary. That's not the case in the rural areas. And so it's important to look outside, if you live in Ann Arbor, to look outside of Ann Arbor and also pay attention to those other races, because they do affect our community. We are a community. The rural areas and the urban areas are dependent upon each other in more ways than one. So again, just really appreciate this conversation, and keep on working at it.
Thank you so much. I'd like to now open the floor to questions. This discussion has been so exhaustive. I mean, I've taken about 6 pages of notes, try to study, that one can go in many directions. So Caroline Altamere.
Greetings. Thank you for this terrific conversation. I'm a precinct delegate in my second term, going to be running for my third. I live between Dexter and Ann Arbor, so kind of in a semi-rural area. So this is very, very good information for me. I guess my question was not so much about procedure so much, but I joined this conversation a bit late. Is this recording going to be, I know this is being recorded, is it going to be available like on the Washtenaw County Facebook page?
It will be. We put all the recordings of our meetings. We've had some good ones recently on the WCDP website. So you'll be able to see the whole meeting.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody on this. This has just been very eye-opening and very enlightening, and makes rural canvassing a lot less intimidating. Thank you.
Thank you. I just point out, to raise your hand, you go to the reactions icon at the bottom right of your screen. You click on that. Underneath it, you see a raised hand with actually a notation, raise hand. And if you click on that, then you will jump to the top of my list, and I'm going to call on you to ask a question. Any further questions? Seeing none, going once, going twice. And would any of the panelists have any parting words for us? Jennifer.
Yes, Eli, a couple of things. Let me find my notes here, because I did want to mention. Okay. First of all, the Western Washtenaw Dems is holding our monthly meeting on, I think it's the 20th of April. It's always the third Wednesday of the month. This month, we are going to be talking about redistricting and where did you land in redistricting? There are a lot of people who don't know where they landed. We've been out doing petitions for getting Debbie Dingell on the ballot. And I have run into a lot of people who didn't know that they're going to be able to vote for Debbie Dingell this fall, which kind of surprised me. But yay, yes, yay. So if you're not sure where you landed, we're going to be talking about that at our meeting in April. And then for those of you who are candidates running for any seat that impacts Western Washtenaw at all, whether it is a state house, state senate, county commission, a court, state board of education, whatever it is, please reach out to me. Make sure you get me your contact information. My contact information is jfairfield 48158 @gmail.com. The reason I'm asking you to do that is we're going to be setting up meet the candidate meetings coming up over our next few, so May, June, July, to introduce people to their candidates. So I would love to make sure that all of you get introduced to our residents out here. So please reach out to me. Let me know if you're a candidate. Some of you, I've got your information, but I want to make sure that if you have not reached out to me yet, that you do that so that we get you on our list to invite to our meetings. I think that's about it.
Thank you.
I have one comment too,
Sure.
before we leave. I wanted to let everybody know that on the last Tuesday of every month, the Rural Caucus is going to have what we call messaging strategy meetings. So like last month, we had a person do a presentation on how they use newspapers for, their advertising. This month, April, the last Tuesday, we are going to show some ads with different taglines and see what taglines people find that they would like, so that we can make consistent postcards and billboards and have people, especially candidates, we want to invite, so that you could say, hey, this ad would really resonate in my county, or this ad would really help me here. And we can get candidates from any place, because we all really do have the same message. And we want to make sure that we can come up with a messaging strategy that helps everyone. So it's the last Tuesday of every month, some type of messaging strategy meeting.
Thank you very much. Kyron, actually, you have a question. I don't know if you saw the question in the chat.
Yeah,
Yes.
I did.
Okay.
So it was asked, if my research touched on, I believe it was like gender and race. So my particular research didn't, but like I said, Close Up sends out this survey to every jurisdiction in Michigan. And so we collect that data on gender and race, and then we can merge in census data as well. So it could be done, but no, that wasn't the particular focus of my research. And then real quick, I kind of wanted to mention something else that Close Up was in the process of doing. The way that cities have been keeping like their financial data, so like with audited financial statements and stuff like that, Close Up has been working on a project where it's a plan to digitize this data. So a lot of times people have to enter in this financial data manually over and over again. But right now we're working with a system that allows people to kind of auto update that after initially doing that. And it's a system that allows it to be shared. So I could look up one township's financial data. I can compare it to another township's financial data and see how we're doing. So that's something that I don't know if people were aware of, but I wanted to say that that's something we're working on, and to possibly keep an eye out for that. And if you're in charge of a township, city, or county and might be interested in something like that, you can email us and we'll tell you more about it.
Great. Thank you very much. I see that we have questions from Janet and Teresa. Janet?
Actually, it's two observations. One, that in addition to people not realizing that Debbie will be our representative over the whole county, many people have retained the impression from all the discussion after the redistricting that we didn't get good maps for the House, and don't realize that if we work our butts off, we actually could make a difference or possibly flip the House. So that's something that we're in the messaging that Teresa and I have been working on. We're definitely making that a key message. Hey, we've got a chance. This is not a done deal that we won't get the House. And the other thing I was thinking about is that something that's come up quite a lot is that, and this I'd love your response to, when you talk to people and you say, well, I'm volunteering with the Dems, the response is often, you're coming there as a Dem, and the Dem party is this like big amorphous mass, including what are they actually doing for us in Washington. So our power in a county party is to elect people who will do the things we need done. So we put forward, obviously, what they have done for us, but we have to know how to talk to people who think that because you're a Dem and you're asking them what the problem is, that why didn't it get solved? Because they told you, you know, in a sense. How do we layer the conversation around those different, what we're able to do, what our electeds will do, how we interact, all of that. Anybody got ideas about that?
Thank you. Teresa.
You're still muted.
Yes, we can take the House. That was one of my big points. And I think Jennifer in a meeting, at one of Laura Guide meetings had said, people don't realize we can take the House. We can take the House because of these new districts. And so that is a huge message to get across. All of us like are responsible for making sure people know that we can do this. So that's huge. But the other thing was, I just wanted to get Jennifer and Marie, would you put in chat for people how to join the meetings you mentioned? Jennifer, the WWD meeting, and Marie, the messaging meetings. It'd be great because I want to be in both of them, and it'd be great to have links in chat.
I can, I'll try to find the link, but our Facebook page, Western Washtenaw Dems Facebook page under events does have the meeting information and the Zoom link for it, but I will try to find it and put it in the chat.
It'd be great because I don't do Facebook.
Okay.
So it'd be really helpful to have that. Thank you so much.
Okay,
I
thank
wondered
you.
if Kyron could also put the link to his organization in the chat one more time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I will do that. And real quick, I was typing the answer, but I guess as I'm talking. So the surveys that we've been doing since about 2009. And what it is sent to the elected officials and not the residents. So we can really keep track on, you know, if mail is the best way they get the surveys, we'll mail them. If we have to do it over the phone, we'll do that. And if internet's the way, we'll do that. So we have a pretty high response rate, but we really try, you know, knowing everybody doesn't have great internet connection, accommodate folks where they need to.
Thank you. So I have any other questions for our panel? I guess my better half sitting next to me pointed out I used the wrong sport for my metaphor. I should have used soccer in the front line. So sorry about that. The ball got in the goal. Okay, so I just want to say thank you so much to all our panelists, Barb, Kyron, Marie, Jennifer, for this incredibly informative meeting. We know you have other things to do with your time, and this will be recorded and placed online, and I think studied, because we clearly have a lot to learn.